Boris Johnson's chief European negotiator, last night accused the EU of attempting to force egregious rules on the UK in the increasingly bitter wrangle over a trade deal. In a hard-hitting letter to Brussels, David Frost said the bloc was trying to fob Britain off with a low-quality trade deal, in contrast to its relationships with other countries. He told his EU counterpart, Michel Barnier, "It does not have to be like this." Mr. Frost, the head of the Prime Minister's Taskforce Europe, spoke out after the government released previously confidential documents setting out details of Mr. Johnson's blueprint for the future relationship between the EU and the UK. Whitehall officials published the 13 legal texts, in an attempt to kickstart the stalled negotiations about a future trade deal. Mr. Frost's warning to Brussels signalled that pressure is intensifying in the talks ahead of a deadline for progress next month set by Mr. Johnson. In his letter to Mr. Barnier, Mr. Frost wrote, "What is on offer is not a fair free trade relationship between close economic partners but a relatively low-quality trade agreement, coming with unprecedented EU oversight of our laws and institutions. We find it perplexing that the EU, instead of seeking to settle rapidly a high-quality set of agreements with a close economic partner, is instead insisting on additional, unbalanced and unprecedented provisions in a range of areas, as a precondition for agreement between us." Mr. Frost said the EU's proposals would bind this country to EU law or standards. Pointing to a particularly egregious example, he said one EU proposal would tie the UK into Brussels state aid rules, potentially hit UK trade with tariffs and leave the country under the rule of the European Court of Justice. In the Commons yesterday, Cabinet Office Minister, Michael Gove, said EU negotiators had to accept the UK had left their club and should no longer be expected to obey its rules. He said, "The EU, essentially, want us to obey the rules of their club, even though we're no longer members."